Michigan State football landed 2 commits over the weekend. The women's basketball team is rolling. The ice hockey team is rolling. And oh my goodness gracious, well, that's a white-hot Minnesota team coming to town.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for keeping it tuned right here. Locked On Spartans, it's your team in green and white 5 days a week. Please rate, review, subscribe, because hey, you know what? We've got a fun show today. There's a lot of good things going on in East Lansing. It's always 86 and sunny at Michigan State University, baby. That's right. We're going to talk about this basketball game. Yes, Minnesota, 3-game win streak, 2 of them against top 20 teams, coming to Breslin Center. We're going to add in a little sprinkle of hockey and women's basketball talk because, well, they had themselves a weekend too. But first, football. That's right, because, hey, Michigan State, yes, it's the offseason, could be a sleepy time. Not for Jonathan Smith, though, and the Spartans, because they got 2 commits over the weekend. One for this upcoming 2025 class. Another one, their first 2026 commit. But let's go in order here, because Antonio Johnson, 6'4", 285-pound offensive lineman from St. Mary's. That's right, another kid from St. Mary's, a state champion over here in the great state of Michigan. So if you're going to pluck from one program over and over again for a class, it might as well be St. Mary's. But yes, the 3-star, he committed to Michigan State over the weekend. He is ranked as the number 74 interior offensive lineman, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, and he is in the top 20 in the state of Michigan. Now, this is potentially the 4th kid from St. Mary's, and we say potential because, well, Charles White, Jaden Savory, that's already in the bag. They already signed in the early signing period. Now, Bryson Williams, he pushed his signing back to this other period. That's not going to happen this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. So nothing's ever certain in the world of recruiting. But should Bryson Williams also sign for Michigan State? Yes. When you add in Antonio Johnson, that's going to be 4 kids from the St. Mary's program. So overall, for the offensive linemen for the 2025 class, you have Drew Nichols, you have Justin Bell. So that is 3 offensive linemen in this class. But when you add in what you got last year, Rustin Young, Rakeem Johnson, the Linyeski twins, Peyton Stewart, and Andrew Dennis, we're going to count him as a commit, even though he technically transferred from Illinois. Nevertheless, that is 9 offensive linemen over the last 2 classes. That is important. And if you haven't realized why that's important, why just having numbers on the offensive line is important after watching last season, the lack of depth there was on the offensive line last season, then I just do not know what to tell you. Obviously, hey, we trust the teaching and the coaching of Jim Maholchek, the offensive line coach, to, progress these guys higher than their 3-star projections. But at the very least, you have 9 bodies to work with over these 2 classes. So that's a welcome sight. Now, the 2026 class also got their first commit not too long after their junior day, not last weekend, but the previous weekend, and it is Joey Caudill out of Ohio, 6'5", 230-pound 3-star tight end prospect, which is interesting because for his high school team down at Lexington High School in Ohio, plays quarterback, he plays linebacker, he scans tickets going into the game, he works the popcorn stand at halftime. This kid does a little bit of everything down there at Lexington. So he's a star player, top athlete. And it's not just, me, a big Michigan State fan saying, hey, he's just a great athlete. No, there are non-biased experts out there, Alan True of 24/7 Sports being one of them, that are very high on his projections as just a raw athlete. What he's done as a quarterback, what he's done on the defensive side of the ball. He's Mr. Do-It-All for Lexington. So as he shifts from quarterback to tight end, well, you've seen it happen here and there, especially in Big Ten country. Let's not forget our guy, Tyler Hunt. That's right. Hey, he was the same Mr. Do-It-All in high school, turned out to be a tight end here. Or if you want the extreme version, and my God, if we could just get 75% of this guy, we'd be over the moon. Hey, Tyler Warren over at Penn State, the best tight end in the nation last year. He came out of high school as this kind of quarterback do-it-all for his high school team. So Michigan State gets a real strong, raw athlete. They beat out Louisville, West Virginia. Those were the other 2 Power 4 offers that he had on the table. So to stack the classes, Really, I actually would imagine that, you add another tight end in this class because right now, just in last year's class, it was only Jaden Savory, guy we just mentioned from St. Mary's. So this would make it, the second tight end in as many classes. So we'll keep an eye on for the rest of the recruiting class, especially for quarterback Cade Kaufman. Now, we talked about Cade Kaufman, quarterback from the great state of Michigan, last week with Rhino Blennis of Spartans Illustrated. Now, he came to the junior day last week, had a good time. Michigan State was his first Power 4 offer. Of course, he's from Michigan, like we just said, so there might be an attachment right there. Okay, but it's going to be a tough recruitment because he's also got offers from Ole Miss. He actually has an offer from Iowa State and just visited Iowa State last weekend for their junior day. So moseyed on over to Cyclone Report. They do great work for Iowa State, part of the Rivals Network. And he said, quote, "As for me, I'm really going on where I feel really good about somewhere. That could be tomorrow. That could be after spring ball. It could be really any time. Just when I feel the best about my decision." Now, he also mentioned that he's going to be visiting Cincinnati in the very near future, too. I think the original plan was to commit, actually on this week, I believe, is what he told a few weeks ago, if not months ago. Sounds like change of plans right there. So we'll see where Michigan State stands with Cade Kaufman. Could be, again, like this week if we hear a commit, whether it's to here, the Spartans, the Bearcats, or, it could be somewhere in the summer. But, hey, could there be another quarterback in the mix? Because Pete Thamel of ESPN, he created somewhat of shockwaves here at Michigan State recruiting because Brady Smigiel, now he's a top 100 kid, number 5 quarterback in the 24/7 Sports Composite. He decommits from Florida State, okay? And then, sure, Brady Smigiel, he's already heard from Ohio State, Michigan, South Carolina, Washington, UCLA, and you could already guess the next school I'm going to name because you're listening to a Michigan State podcast. It's your Michigan State Spartans have their name attached to this kid as well. So that would be a little fascinating if things progress more than just the conversations. I think they still would take the Cade Kaufman commitment with wide open arms, and that would probably shut their conversations with Mr. Smigiel down. But yeah, just keep your name on that. I'm just one person with one opinion. I would be a little surprised if this transpires into anything more than just conversations. Like, I would be a little floored if he ever does come to campus. But hey, you know what? I'd welcome it. Again, top 100 kid, number 5 quarterback in the class. He has every school after him, of course, so it would be a very difficult one. But hey, maybe work into some advantage for Jonathan Smith. Yeah, this kid's from Southern California, the same backyard as Mr. Smith there. So there we are. That's your offseason update. Of course, we're going to keep talking about Michigan State football during this whole offseason, but just a little bit of checkup right here. Aside from the commits, aside from where Cade Kaufman is, let's talk transfer portal because, sure, like Rocco Spindler, he started at Notre Dame, who had themselves a nice season. He's from Clarkston, started every game for the Fighting Irish last year. He put his name in the transfer portal, and when that happened, I was thinking, sure, let's just keep the offensive lineman recruiting out of the portal rolling here. Doesn't appear that he's going to be on Michigan State's radar. He does have visits planned to Indiana, Nebraska, Michigan, so still going to stay in the Big Ten and the Midwest area, but haven't seen Michigan State's name attached. Of course, we'll update everyone if anything changes, but right now, just going back to our conversation with Rhino Blennis last week, as we go more into the offseason. Again, it's a sleepy period for the transfer portal, but hey, you know what? Before we know it, the spring cycle will be here. They'll look to add a corner, a safety, a rush end, potentially a tight end too. So keep your eye on corner because, yes, they did get 3 names, Nijay Burt, Josh Eaton, Malcolm Bell. They still have to replace Ed Woods and Chuck Brantley. Okay, those were your 2 best corners on last year's team. And yes, you still have Brinson, Rucker, Hughes, Wiley, Coley, Cavazos. Wiley was the only guy out of that group to have more than 100 snaps out of those guys returning then. Rhino Blennis said this last week too, and I don't think this is going to shock anyone, but I would expect some more departures from Michigan State in the spring cycle. I would expect departures from every program, really, kind of where guys realize where they fall on the depth chart going further into the offseason. But yeah, with that said, it's not like you're going to lose anyone with a ton of experience. But yeah, I would expect them to add another guy with experience. Could it be like last year, Ed Woods leaves a Power 4 school to come to East Lansing? That's shooting for the moon. I wouldn't expect that, but I imagine it's somewhere along the lines of what they're going to be looking for. Someone with experience. That's what you see with the 3 corners that they have right now with Burt, Eaton, and Bell, all doing it at a lower level, like UConn, Texas State, and Eastern Illinois. But Hey, they've shown production at least somewhere, and that is important. All right, guys, we're going to be back here in a hot segment. First, need to talk your ears off about FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook, and gear up for Super Bowl 59 with America's #1 sportsbook. It is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, tails never fails, baby. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. You know I will have my FanDuel app open throughout the duration of this game. Now, it gets even better because, well, for new customers, you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets on the Super Bowl if you win that bet. That's some icing on the cake right there. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. Now, we are going to talk basketball here, men's basketball, your #7 ranked men's basketball team, but it was just too good of a weekend for other sports to not just mention right now. I don't want to shove this at the end of the show because women's basketball, by the way, also in the top 20, your #16th ranked women's basketball team. Well, I guess you could say they beat Michigan, or they absolutely clubbed them over the head in the second half because, well, this was a big game going into it. On Saturday, it was the first time, which I can't believe, like the first time ever that both these teams met while both ranked. I mean, how good have the program's been? At least solid. Anyway, Michigan State, it was a slow first half, I guess. They were down 4 points, 33-29 at halftime in front of the fourth largest crowd in Michigan history. And then they started the second half, just on a little 15-0 run. Guys, again, they were down 4 points at halftime. They won this game, if you haven't caught the final score, 88-58. Yeah, that will get the job done. 55 points in the second half from Robin Freilic's team. My goodness gracious. That is the largest margin of victory in Ann Arbor in MSU program history. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. A 30-point beatdown. It's not too shabby. This is also the second straight game for the Spartans with 4 players in double figures. Theryn Hallock led the way with 25 points. Grace Van Slooten, 7th straight game in double figures. And right now in the Big Ten, Michigan State sits in 4th place, like in a stacked conference. The Big Ten is thriving in women's basketball right now. They're 7-2 overall, and right now the fireworks are still unfolding in the Breslin Center when the women's Spartans are taking the court. 82.8 points per game. That is second most in the Big Ten, only behind USC, who themselves is a juggernaut. So if you want to see the women's basketball team, you don't have to wait long. This Thursday at 6 p.m., they're going to host Oregon. That's right, in the Grace Van Slooten Bowl. She transferred from Oregon over the offseason, so that should be a good one. All right, and hockey, just still a absolute wagon. Now, there's 8 conference games to go in the Big Ten. Michigan State now has a 5-point lead on Minnesota, and really at this point, it's a 2-horse race. Ohio State, I think, is a dozen points behind, but yes, with 8 conference games to go, 5-point lead on Minnesota, who they played over the weekend if you missed it. And a football game broke out on Friday because your Spartans won 9-3. That's right. The first period, just 1 goal scored by Michigan State, and then bam, 4 more in the second period. Bam, 4 more in the third period. David Gucciardi and Isaac Howard both had 2 goals. Daniel Russell, 2 assists and a goal. And Maxim Sturbach, how about just 4 assists for the young man? And they followed that up with another winning effort on Saturday. This came in a shootout, so, they had to steal a point in overtime. But 3-3 at the end of regulation, shootout win for the extra point. David Gucciardi, 2 assists in that game. Tanner Kelly, a goal and an assist. So that is the season sweep, technically, against Minnesota. What would that be? Let's do some math here. 12 possible points. Michigan State gets away with 10 of them. 2 shootout wins, 2 regulation wins against a Minnesota team that is in the top 5. Like, they themselves are a wagon, and Michigan State has taken it to them so far this season. So good on you, Michigan State. Now, let's keep the topic of conversation on the School of Minnesota, but let's switch sports. This team isn't necessarily ranked in the top 5 in their sport, but the Minnesota Gophers basketball team is spicy. And it was fun to watch, like when they're beating Michigan. Dawson Garcia hits a 100-foot jumper at the end of overtime. They beat Oregon. And then you realize, oh, God, we're next in line for them. Now the last meeting, if you've forgotten about it, it was 90-72. So it was really never a sweaty one for our Michigan State Spartans. But what's going to be different about this game for the Michigan State Spartans versus the Minnesota Gophers? Well, first and foremost, fun, woohoo, go Networks. This game is on Peacock. So if you're not going to be at the game, you got to get the app. But let's actually talk about what's important, what's going to go on the court. Like we've just been talking about, what's different? Minnesota's a hot team. They've won 3 in a row against Michigan, at Iowa, home against Oregon. So that is 2 top 20 wins and a road victory in the Big Ten. It sounds silly. It sounds like just rah, wave your pom-poms, woohoo, cliche. But Minnesota's playing inspired basketball under Ben Johnson. And that's not to say you should expect teams to quit at this point in the season, if they're already out of the conference chase. They almost have no shot of making the tournament. But you could very well see how a team in Minnesota's shape can just come out, a little lackadaisical in every game. No, they're playing with their hair on fire. This is a team that looks like they're actually playing themselves on the right side of the bubble. So great for Ben Johnson to, really inspire these guys night in and night out, and finally catching some good breaks, because not only is it Minnesota at a disadvantage, talent-wise, resource-wise, but my God, you watch some of their games and it feels like you're watching the Buffalo Bills, if I could cross sports. It really seems like they're catching the raw end of every single break possible. But hey, they've had some good ones go their way recently. Now, I know we were going to talk about what's different than the last matchup. This really isn't different, because Dawson Garcia is still the guy to watch out for, the 6'10" stretch player for the Gophers. But he is on fire lately. 20-plus points in 5 straight games. Now, the big difference for Minnesota this game, as opposed to last game, is that Mike Mitchell, their guard, is going to be more available. Now, he came off the bench last game, came into the matchup a little hampered, but you know what? Seems like a full go now, played north of 30 minutes against Oregon, and that's important for Minnesota for 2 big reasons. One, he's a 40% career shooter from 3. This kid can knock down a three-pointer, but maybe more importantly for Minnesota, he is a very, very strong defender on the perimeter. He can really heat up the ball well, bother the other team's point guard. So Jeremy Fears, I know, who had a tough-ish outing last game. I'm not, calling it an F- performance by Fears, but certainly production-wise was maybe his quote-unquote worst game in quite some time. Let's see if he can have a bounce-back game. It's not going to come against an easy opponent, because, Mike Mitchell, who, again, will be most likely a full go in this game, he's going to give him a run for his money. So what to watch for Michigan State? Well, it's not just Fears that has to have a bounce-back game. We talked about this yesterday with our guy Sam Martin. It was almost nice that they won with, so many starters not having their A game, their B game, maybe not even their C game. But I'd really like to not see it happen 2 games in a row, and I know Tom Izzo wouldn't want to see that. So, hey, Jaden Akins, who, while defensively, I think he played really good against Rutgers, offensively, the numbers don't lie. He had a really tough game offensively. Can he bounce back, be a little more efficient? Jackson Kohler, little tough to dog him for last game. Yes, it's because he was in foul trouble why he played so little, but he played 10 minutes, got 2 rebounds. Whereas last time he played Minnesota, he got 11 rebounds in that outing. So I might be taking a peek to see if FanDuel has any rebounding overs for one Jackson Kohler, because I like this in a bounce-back spot too. So Torvik expects this to be a 74-61 Michigan State victory. And guys, this is the last call for, I guess, quote-unquote, I don't want to say easy win, because, I don't want us to overlook Minnesota, and that's just, funny leaving my mouth, me, just a Michigan State podcaster, and you, a Michigan State fan, overlooking an opponent, as if we have anything to do with what goes on in the court from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Breslin Center. But just, you don't want to overlook an opponent, right? But this is the last, I guess, real gettable game, if you want to use it that way, before February starts, because go ahead and just take a peek at that schedule. We're going to talk a little bit more about the schedule, more importantly, the Big Ten race and what the numbers have to say about Michigan State's chances. But first, you need to talk your ears off about TurboTax. That's right. This message is from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with the TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. That's right. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert will find every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything possible with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. There's no waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, so I'm going to state the obvious here. Michigan State with a 2-game lead in Big Ten play. Yeah, the computers like them to win the Big Ten title. Now, how much? Well, right now, it's a 55% chance, roughly, on BartTorvik.com to at least get a share of the title. Michigan State to win it outright, stand on top of the mountain all by themselves. Well, they are the leaders right now, 35.3%. Now, Purdue is the next best odds to share the title. They're at 39.7%. Michigan has an 18.5% chance. And Illinois and Wisconsin still hanging around, both around a 9% chance to at least share the title. Now, the rest of the season, let's just go through all the games right now really quick in case you're not just staring directly at a schedule to realize what we mean when we talk about the rest of the season being a little tougher than what Michigan State has had to face. Now, away at USC and away at UCLA. That's your West Coast trip. Home against Oregon, home against Indiana, at Illinois, home against Purdue, at Michigan, at Maryland, home against Wisconsin, at Iowa, home against Michigan. Hey, it's great that Michigan State is 8-0 right now. We talked about this on yesterday's show. You've probably heard it from opposing fans, too, that are just real taking Michigan State's success greatly. 7 of those wins have been against teams in the Big Ten that are not 500 in conference play. So this is where we start to see those other teams that are above 500. So we're going to learn a lot about this team here in February. Again, should they beat Minnesota? It's not a guarantee. Of course it's not, especially with how the Gophers are playing lately. But this is what else the computers have to say. They give your most likely conference record. And when I say computers, I mean BartTorvik.com. They give your most likely record at 15-5 for Michigan State, which, A, is believable, and that very well could do it for the conference title. It's nasty. It's a dogfight, and we'll see if they can get some separation from Purdue here. But, yeah, 15-5 looks very reasonable. So the computers are also telling you you will be underdogs in 4 games remaining in the regular season. At UCLA by a slim margin. Illinois by roughly 8, and then Michigan and Maryland, those are about roughly 5-point underdogs. Now, there's also some games that are going to be a little close. You are favored against USC. You are favored at home against Purdue. You are favored at home against Wisconsin, at Iowa, and at home against Michigan, but all by less than 5 points. So after Minnesota, should you win, okay, just want to get that clear. I don't need the Locked On Spartans jinx being brought up on me if Minnesota rips our heart out or anything. But after Minnesota, with 11 games left, can you finish the season 6-5? Well, let's just go through it really quick right now. Can you split that West Coast trip that we're talking about? Can you go 1-3 in your other road games? Let's call it win at Iowa, lost to Illinois, lost to Michigan, lost to Maryland. All very possible. And can you also beat Purdue at home? That's going to be a massive game. You only see Purdue once this season. It's at Breslin Center. And then after that home game against Purdue, can you just fall once at home? You can give yourself a 1-game home loss cushion to, we'll call it Wisconsin, for example. That still spits out a 15-5 record, and especially if you beat Purdue, well, that means you got to count on Purdue to also lose 2 more games to at least get a share of the title against the Boilermakers. It is possible. Again, in no way is the rest of the schedule going to be a walkover, and we are going to, really get to know just how good this Michigan State team is. I think they're fine. I think they've been handling their business. I think that, no, you shouldn't apologize for playing the weaker teams, especially when you get 4, should have been 5 on Saturday, double-digit victories. But, yeah, that's where we have it right now, and that's where the computers have it. So it's possible. It's better than a coin toss chance to at least get a share of the conference title. Just got to make sure that you win on Tuesday. against Minnesota, 8 p.m. That's where it all starts. Now, we're going to jump into the mailbag for a few questions. Guys, as always, lockedonspartans@gmail.com. Just like our guy Rob hits us with a 2-pack of questions here. He writes in, would you take being a national championship contender year in and year out in hockey, men's and women's basketball, gymnastics, and soccer in order for the football team to suffer a little? And then suffer just like a 10-2, 9-3 ceiling where most years are 5-7 to 7-5. I think I might with the way that sport is trending. Aren't you certainly painting a great picture of what is currently happening right here at Michigan State. Guys, I love basketball. Like, the men's team is great. I love that the women's team is becoming relevant in a sport that is largely exploding in college. The hockey team being fun is very fun for all involved. With that said, I'm sorry, I want to be relevant in like the big sports. I want to have a good team in like the one that matters is what I'll say the most. It's not to say that we're not having fun right now. I would give maybe my first and second born sorry kids for another Izzo national title, but I would also probably do the same to just have like a real good football team. So I'm sorry, I gotta send gymnastics and hockey behind the barn because, I'm desperate to just have some relevant football, guys. It's been 3 straight years without a bowl game. That is starting to wear on yours truly over here. We're having fun in the winter. We are having a great time right now. But, God, I want to smile in the fall again. I want to smile in the fall. I want what every other good team in the Big Ten has. And that's happiness. That's happiness. Anyway, his second question he had. Next one, what's your thoughts on the upcoming West Coast trip for the men's team? Growing up and even now, I always remember the Tigers, Red Wings, and Pistons always struggled on their trips out there, losing games they shouldn't, which honestly might be the only reason why I'm worried. No, that's correct, especially because those professional sports, like when they do their West Coast swings, it could be 4-5 straight games over there in outside of, your normal time zone. So it can wear on you a little bit. We've also seen college football teams. Our Michigan State Spartans go out west and get their teeth kicked out of their skull. So I actually did a little exercise here. I did West Coast teams in the Big Ten, so USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, so far this season against other Big Ten teams that are not from the West Coast. So like Oregon versus Washington, I didn't count that, okay? Right now, USC, Oregon, Washington are all 1-2 actually at home against outside Big Ten teams. UCLA, they're not perfect. They're just 2-1. Now, this isn't a perfect science, of course. I'm not saying that, this is actually great. It's a small sample size. Like, each of these teams have just played 3 games at the time of recording against East or Central time zone teams. And also, Oregon has also hosted Purdue and Illinois, like 2 great teams in the Big Ten. What really hurts this little project, too, Washington is just terrible. So, like, them being 1-2 at home, how much credence can you put into that? Or how much stock can you put into that? But I got to say, though, I guess you can be a little worried. I think it's fine just because it's one trip. Now, I imagine the team will stay out there in between games. I think it's a Saturday, Tuesday split. If it was, extending into 3-4 games out there and they're away from home for, a week and a half, okay, I'd be really, really concerned. But right now, UCLA... they look beatable, obviously. We just talked about not too long ago how Michigan State is just, I think it's 0.7 or 0.8 point underdogs right now on the computers. USC, it's been a slow start under Musselman over there. But, it will be different than football, though, because my mind immediately goes to, oh, my God, college kids on a West Coast trip. How can they handle jet lag? And then I remember football is a little different, right? Like, the atmosphere alone is different. And I'm not just talking about, the road environment. The fans are more hostile. I mean, I was at the game in Tempe, Arizona against Arizona State when it was 107 degrees at kickoff. Like, our sweet, just gentlemanly Midwest boys do not work well in an oven like that. So, and largely Big Ten teams usually don't. So, no, I think there is enough things that are different with football, basketball, professional West Coast trips, and college West Coast trips. I'm not saying Michigan State's guaranteed to go 2-0, but I just don't think that there's much importance, and I hope Michigan State next week can back this all up for me. That'd be just dandy. Last one here. Michael writes in, early in the year, I was thinking Coen Carr has potential to be my favorite Spartan of all time. Now I'm saying he gets his number 55 in the rafters if he stays 4 years and keeps improving. Thoughts? Is it possible, or am I just high? And he writes in parentheses, I am. That was sent at roughly 8:38 in the morning on Friday, Michael. Way to get your weekend started on a high note there. No pun intended. Rafters? Oh, man. Like, probably not, just because it's very hard to get in the rafters, but maybe. Right after I got this question, I did look at NBA mock drafts just to see if he's snuck into the second round of any of them on the internet, and at least the ones I've checked, like Coen Carr still isn't in any mock drafts, and I guess that shouldn't be a massive surprise. He does come off the bench for Michigan State. But so does Jace Richardson, and he's mocked in a lot of late first rounds right now. So if he keeps coming back, third year, fourth year, and let's say the nucleus of him, Fears, Richardson, please come back. Like, they're back next year or the year after that, oh, my goodness, and do something special, like Final Four, dare I say win it all, you're going to have a long discussion about, hey, of those guys, who's going to get put in the rafters? So, you know what? Like, a lot of things have to align. But yeah, if Michigan State does go on and continues to grow off this year with the way that Coen Carr's game is growing itself, you can close your eyes hard enough and dream of a number 55 in the rafters. Would I expect it? No. But what I will heavily agree on is that Coen Carr's already one of my favorite Spartans of all time too. The electricity this man brings onto a television, onto Breslin Center's court, I've never seen anything like it. And I do remember a little bit of the Jason Richardson days, the Mo Ager days, Shannon Brown. Of course, you remember Miles Bridges. He was electric, but no one's doing it like Coen Carr. And the fact that you've seen him grow this much from last year where he was just a circus act of a dunker to a bona fide, actual competent basketball player all around. He's not just entertaining, but you see his work ethic. He's just everything that a Michigan State basketball player is, just built in the lab. And I love it. I love him for it. God, it just brings me so much happiness. All right, guys, we will be back tomorrow. We're going to talk with someone in the 2025 recruiting class. Don't want to jinx anything. And, of course, we're going to talk about this Minnesota game that I probably jinxed to oblivion because we talked about, hey, Michigan State, Big Ten, driver's seat, whatever. We're going to get to that tomorrow. All right, guys. Hey, until then, take care of yourselves. Say hi to me if you see me at the Breslin Center. Love you all. Go Green.